I come from a family of artists. My mother was in the Martha Graham Dance Company, and my earliest training was actually in dance, and my mother was choreographing. So I was very used to this idea of storytelling on stage in a particular way, and very, very comfortable with being in an empty theater during rehearsals. It's kind of sort of my home space. It's just being, the smell of an empty theater. And my dad is also a writer, so also storytelling, and I was growing up with that on both sides. But I started singing pretty young because I was doing musical theater shows. I was the dance captain, or I was in the dance troupe, and I was also singing. And my mother's in-laws from her first marriage were big Broadway stars in the 1940s and 1950s, and so I had my earliest voice lessons actually with them when I was around 13. And they said, okay, they said to my mom, you need to find her a voice teacher. So from the age of 14 on, I was going to become an opera singer. It informed everything. I was doing local competitions and singing with local orchestras and taking voice lessons every week and still dancing at the same time. So it was pretty much just foundational for me. And then I did the kind of typical path that many opera singers do. I did a master's of music. I was a freelance opera singer for about 10 years. And during that time, I started doing other things. I started a little opera company to give myself and my friends performance opportunities. I started writing text for composers to set to music so that I could sing characters that I thought were a little more interesting than what I was singing. So it all sort of snowballs in that way. But look, the act of singing on stage, I mean, there's nothing like it. There's just so much coordination involved, not just physically, but emotional, mentally. It's one of the reasons why people train for decades to be able to sing at a certain level. This is far beyond 10,000 hours to become an opera singer. And when you're on that stage and everything does align and you're actually communicating with the audience and everyone freezes and they're just watching you, I mean, it's a really magical flow state. And those are the moments that audiences leave the theater saying, oh my gosh, that was transformative. I want to go back to try to experience that again. And I should say, I do not perform anymore. I haven't performed, my career transitioned into a different direction, but you are giving something of yourself. There's a vulnerability in order to really connect with a character and to sing in that way and to channel the drama that's happening around you. There is a cost, and you can really feel drained after a performance. You have to recover. It's like any creative craft where, it's almost as if there's a muse behind you that's sort of sapping some of your energy for you to get to that state. But it's such a high level of excellence involved. I mean, it's really, there's nothing really like it when you think about human excellence and what the human body can do. We're talking about someone just using their physical body, no microphones, no AI, to project their voice over the sound of an orchestra. And not just to make a noise that's ugly and loud, but to actually navigate the musical notes that a composer wrote and the text that a librettist wrote, and then move around on stage in character. I mean, it kind of boggles the mind. So they talk about opera in the field as it's basically an Olympic sport, but the muscles are just here and up here. So I think I've written now maybe 8 operas and a number of art songs and monodramas. So those are operas for one person. And it generally is the same rough process in that it starts with an idea, which can come either from an opera company or a performer or a composer or from me. Then there's a lot of outlining involved. It's basically like writing a spoken play, right? I basically write a script that the composer then will set to music. So there's a lot of outlining. I flesh it out. And then there's a script, but it's a very particular kind of craft because, of course, all the words are going to be sung. They're not going to be spoken. So the audience has to be able to understand what people are saying. The performers have to be able to sing the words. You can't have something like, well, I guess you can have supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but that's not a common word in opera. And then the process really becomes collaborating with the composer. And this is why every opera is actually different every time, because that relationship, that back and forth with the composer negotiating, compromising, deciding that a character maybe needs a bit more to say there, or maybe they need something else here. That's an extended process that can sometimes be very fraught, but can also be very, very productive. Because really, when you're talking about opera, we have three big components that are all squished together. We have the text and the story and the characters, which is what the librettist does. We have the music and the orchestras, which is what the singers sing, and that's what the composer does. And then we have the staging. We have the performance, which is led by a stage director and a team of designers. So between these three groups, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of pressure points that can emerge. And it's actually one of the battlegrounds that I talk about in the book, because it can be so complicated how you actually put these three different art forms together. So the inspiration for Opera Wars is really driven by my own experience with the opera industry from many different sides. I've worked in the industry as a singer, a freelance singer. I've worked as an opera librettist, writing the text for operas. I've worked as a company director, running my own little company in Baltimore. And now I have a day job as an opera researcher, researching the industry and how people are hired and how people work. So anytime you spend that long within a given industry, and I'm sure this is your experience as well with your field, you can't help but start to see the cracks and the pitfalls and the pressure points and the dysfunction. So even when you love a field, you can still start to hate it a little bit. So in a way, Opera Wars was really about me grappling with my own mixed feelings about the art form, and trying to understand why it is the way it is. So I divide the book into 8 different battlegrounds so we can really dig into each of the pressure points and conflicts that surround things like, what do you do with 200-year-old operas that are written by dead composers and reflect their time and not ours? What do you do about casting? Who's supposed to be cast for certain kinds of operas and who shouldn't be cast? What about working conditions and singer career pathways, financial pressures that companies are under? All of these essentially distinct battlegrounds that really overlap. They're cumulative, and they build and build so that the opera industry is really amazing and dysfunctional and fascinating. One of the big battles is around money, and this is a matter of the business of opera, which is in no way a good business model. It is not a successful business model. It has never been a successful business model. Opera has always been more expensive than what you can actually bring in from ticket sales. So that means the gap has to be covered somehow, usually from donors or grants. So that is a big battle, is over money and how do we actually survive to next season. Then we have battles that are more around interpersonal issues. So one of the chapters, I look at rehearsal rooms, backstage, where you have often really problematic power dynamics at work because you have a bunch of freelance singers who need to get the next job. And you have directors and conductors who are in a position of power, who are spending their energy to create a particular artistic output. And there can be tension between what it takes to produce the art that they're trying to produce and actual working conditions and how people are treated in those rooms. Another really big battleground within the industry is between audiences, because people really disagree about how certain operas should be staged, especially, famous historical ones like the opera Carmen, which is very much one of the greatest hits of the opera canon. People really disagree about how that's supposed to be staged. And people take it very personally when it's not staged the way they think it should be staged. And we're talking like people pushing each other, people screaming at the stage, very dramatic, operatic stuff. So in structuring the book, obviously, I was aiming to have some detachment to say, okay, let's just lay out the battle that's happening in this particular chapter. What are the conflicts? What's happening on both sides? But of course, I'm the one writing it. Obviously, I have opinions. And so sometimes those opinions do come through. But it's really, I don't say that I'm solving any of these issues. I don't say that we're going to find peace at the end of the Opera Wars. But at least we understand better what's happening and some of the origins of where these conflicts are coming from. So I do draw on my own experience. So there are aspects of the book that are almost memoir-esque, from when I was a singer and auditioning or when I was running my own company. But I also drew on original research because I researched the industry from that side. And I interviewed 29 really interesting opera insiders. So I interviewed directors, I interviewed conductors, opera singers, company directors to say, okay, what's your perspective? What do you think about this? And so the result is this really interesting balance between, it's part ode, it's part satire, it's part expose, but it really digs into each of these fields within the industry, but in a way that's also accessible. You don't need to have a master's degree to read this book. You don't need to, it's not a traditional musicological tome that is going to be a lot of work and requires you to have a music dictionary. I bring everyone up to speed. If you're an opera newbie, I'll bring you up to speed and then we can all dig into the dirt together. Look, I mean, it's reflective of the industry. It's reflective of how people feel about it. And I think it's a good thing that people care so much about it. I mean, the worst thing would be apathy, right? And I know obviously there's a big portion of the population that says, oh, opera, that's not for me. I have no interest. But there is another, percentage that really have strong opinions. They believe they're trying to save opera. There's this idea that opera needs to be saved. Oh, it's dying. I disagree with the idea that it's dying, of course, but people are trying to save it. I think where the conflict is that no one really agrees what it needs to be saved from or how to save it.